I think I became a painter because I'm a curious person by nature, and I love stuff. I love the feel of stuff. My first lessons in handling paint, before I knew anything about being a painter, were in the South, where I would take big heaping handfuls of mud in the marsh or sand. I would splat it down on the dock and then just trowel my hand through it, creating big fat marks, layer upon layer. I would sometimes put little bits of colored paper and then another splat of mud on top of that, and then use a shell to incise through and reveal little bits of color, and then I would continue layering on top. That was how, when I paint today, I still think about big handfuls of sticky mud.
Huh?
I was just down in South Carolina, and I ran into the first person I ever had art instruction from. I grew up in a small town and went to a very small school. There was no exposure whatsoever to the visual arts. There was no art whatsoever in my family. It all just came out of nowhere with me, the firstborn of 3 boys. But I ran into this teacher, and he actually said he's a big fan of these videos and he watches them, so hi Tom. And we started talking about the old days when I was about 12 years old. I had been painting and drawing since I was about in 1st grade on my own, but my mom thought it might be a good idea to get a little bit of formal instruction, and she asked the school art teacher if I could stay 1 day a week after school for an hour or so and just get a little bit of formal training in how to form and value and those things. He said yes. So 1 day a week, it was me and a 12-year-old girl with pigtails and the teacher, and he would close the door and turn on Richard Pryor records, and we would sit there and paint watercolors. And I realized all these years later what a fabulous education that was. Not just the visual part, the technical part, but also the freedom represented in those Richard Pryor records. The comedic timing, the irreverence, the rhythm in the attack, in the delivery, and also the notion that there was one kind of school that happened before, and then we would close the door, cut on those albums, and a different kind of school started. I'm very grateful for those times. And it got me to thinking about that, and later I came home and started looking through my old yearbooks from high school. And some of the inscriptions that friends would put in there at the end of the year. And one of them said, hey, dear Brian, hey, you're a really nice guy, but you're a weirdo. And it brought a big grin to my face. And I don't even remember reading that all those years ago, but I want to sort of address that notion, which I'm sure you as artists, or at least from my standpoint, have felt, that feeling of being a little bit separate from others and being called sometimes strange or weird. We might as well get this out of the way right away. All artists, all creative people are crazy, all of us. We have to be. Some more than others. My writer friends, I think, are bug nutty crazy. Sorry to my friends, but I think writers are crazier than painters. But anyway, to see the world differently, you have to be a little bit strange. To have all that pent up lust for uttering something deeply personal about yourself, or that seeking lucidity at the expense of all else, to me speaks of a certain need for a little bit of strangeness, a little bit of thinking differently than other people. This is a feature, not a bug. This is a good thing. The question is, do you inhabit your weirdness? Do you own it? My hero, Glenn Gould, the Canadian pianist, was often written about and called strange. And certainly he had idiosyncrasies, but all of them were funneled into his work. Everything went into his work. At the end of the day, he knew exactly what he wanted to achieve in his work, and he set up his life to achieve that with no compromises, unconditionally. That to me is the picture of sanity. That's not crazy at all. To me, it'd be crazy not to do that. So he's who I model my life after. As far back as my memory goes, I've always felt a little bit separate from cliques and groups, and I'm so okay with that. I was a shy kid. I got along well with people. I had a wonderful childhood, but I always felt a little bit separate from others. I still feel that way, and that's what I draw from. That's part of the platform from which I work. And all of you as artists are familiar with that glorious aloneness that comes with being a creative person. That need for solitude, solitude as the prerequisite for the creative act, as Glenn Gould used to say. And in that aloneness is how we find what I call our far-seeing place. The place where we feel clarity of thinking, clarity of intent, and clarity of execution. Our far-seeing place. I had that as a kid. I always had it. And as an adult, all I've managed to do is get closer to accessing it. I can turn it on immediately like that. I can get right to it, to that far-seeing place. And I can tell you that the secret of the success I've had as a painter comes from marrying the right person. I married the love of my life, my wife Katie, from taking care of my health, and from being able to access my far-seeing place.
Here I'm mixing cadmium orange, Indian yellow, and dioxazine purple. The cadmium orange being opaque, the other two colors are transparent. And whenever you mix an opaque color like titanium white with a transparent, you create what's called a tint. Sometimes I like to substitute that opaque color for others, and in this case, it's cadmium orange. And it creates a beautiful kind of mineral, shadowy color. Reminds me of William Hogarth a little bit. And I did add a little bit of titanium white here in the end, just to bring the value up a little bit. But I'm thinking about pairing like a snow cone blue with this color later on. I'll let you know how that goes.
I love the limitations of painting. I've talked about this before. If you listen to a song like Stardust by Frank Sinatra, which I love, there's a set of rules. It's a basic song structure, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. The brilliance of it is the way that the artist, Sinatra, inhabits the song and creates a world within that song, a world with breadth and soul and circumspection, all within the preconceived rules of the form. A contemporary painter like Suzanne Fricon, the same thing, or Rackstraw Downs, another contemporary painter. There are rules that they play by, but they manage to expand and contract and soar, but always with those self-imposed limitations. I've said this before, freedom is not doing anything you want. Freedom is doing everything you can inside of a little box this big. You have to have boundaries to push up against, I believe. I love the notion of a blank canvas. To me, it is not a total free open road. To me, it's a declaration of limitations that I have to push against and try to master over the arc of a lifetime to be able to speak clearly and truthfully in that form. That's why I think it's so important to practice, to paint as much as you possibly can, all the time. Don't show anybody, just fuck up all the time. You can always fix it. It doesn't matter, no one cares. Just keep working so that you're able to speak clearly, quickly from that far-seeing place I talked about before, and operate within the boundaries of paint on canvas. Robert Rauschenberg, another favorite of mine, combined traditional and non-traditional materials, but still through the lens of form and line and the treatment of light and dark, all to talk about all the issues and all the ideas that he had, social, political, personal, but all within the limits of three-dimensional or two-dimensional work. A painter like Edwin Dickinson, who I've also talked about before, a very interesting painter, would start his paintings with what he called color spots. He would simply, on the blank canvas, put down one carefully mixed area of color, then another carefully area mixed, and then a third color near that. Not worrying at all about outlines. In other words, he wasn't filling in drawn shapes with color. He was putting down masses of color, refusing to see any details, looking over the details, seeing the big masses and the interrelationships of color. Painting is in a large part, I think, delayed gratification. You plant seeds here that will be harvested later. The idea is to be able to be confident and clear-headed in those seeds that you plant now, knowing that in 6 months they will come to fruition or hopefully reveal something that will signal the end and the completion of the painting. To me, I've always believed this, that painting is the intensification of limitations. I'm a landscape painter, but my favorite paintings tend to be figurative paintings, the ones that I like to look at and study. A painter like Thomas Gainsborough, for instance, or Manet, or Tiepolo especially. The notion of looking at someone looking is fascinating to me. In a Tiepolo, for instance, the gaze of the figures both at each other and at other parts of the picture, and also gazing at something, some event, something outside of the parameters of the painting. Are they seeking something? Are they escaping something? I like the notion of the painting having eyes inside of it, looking at the painting before we even get to it. And because of that, over the last 30 years, as I make a painting over the ensuing several months, I like to do what I call hidden eyes. I imagine eyes hidden all throughout the painting, looking at every single part of the painting, so that by the time you, the spectator, see it, it's already warmed up, it's already worn in. The painting has already been seen from every possible angle. I love that notion of something being worn in. Not worn out, but worn in. That's one of the things I love so much about the low country of South Carolina, where I was born, and also about New York City, where I live and have lived for the last 26 years, that both seem like they're worn in. And that when I walk down the street in Manhattan and I gaze up at facades of buildings, you can almost imagine millions of little craters created by eyes over the centuries that have just gazed at every single part of the city. Everything has been seen before. It just hasn't been seen by me yet. So I love that notion of the picture being warmed up from the inside out. It's already been seen, the engine's already running, and it's ready for the viewer to see it. And it brings to mind, I read a good deal of poetry, and one of the great honors of the last 25 years of my life was getting to know the American poet Samuel Minash, who was born and died in New York City. He died in 2011. I met him in about 2005. I had been very interested in his work. He creates very short, very concise, and very personal poems, which I won't even describe. I'll put one up on the screen after I'm finished talking. For me to read it wouldn't do it justice. But I called him up. His name was in the book. He lived alone in a 5th floor walk-up on Thompson Street in the Village. And I just picked up the phone and called him, as is my wont. If I'm interested in somebody, I call them or I get in touch with them. I told him how much I like his work. I asked him if I could have his permission to print one of his poems in the catalog for a 2005 exhibition I had at Forum Gallery here in New York. He said, I'd like to come see your work. I had him over. We talked for hours. He loved what I was doing, where I was coming from, and he gave me permission to use the poem Reeds Rise from Water. And what I love about that poem, again, is it speaks about the notion of hidden eyes, which is something Samuel and I would continue to talk about for the next 6 years until his death. I'd have him over fairly frequently. We would meet on a park bench in Central Park and just feed pigeons and talk about life as an artist, the glorious aloneness, which I talked about before, that one must have as an artist, and also our great city, Manhattan. I learned so very much about painting from talking to a non-painter, which is generally the case. My favorite artists are almost always not painters. And it was one of those friendships. He would write me handwritten notes with parts of new poems or old poems that he's just resurrected, and I cherish those. And it's one of those friendships I didn't realize was so important to me as a painter until it was too late. So it was great to know him, and I miss him a lot. But I'm very, very grateful for that opportunity.